And our guest today is Katie Talati, head of research at Arca, a cryptocurrency investment management firm. Katie, welcome to All About Bitcoin. Katie, not sure we can hear you. I'm not hearing you in any case. Is the audio coming through okay?
There we go. Thanks for having me, Galen. Sorry about that.
Much better. No worries. Happens to me at least once a day. Great to have you on. In Q4, I think Arca reported crossing $500 million in AUM. Congratulations. Maybe we could start off by talking about how you're looking at allocating that in 2022.
Awesome. Well, Arca, as of now, we actually have 4 different fund strategies. And so the strategies, are basically allocated based on, kind of the sector or area that they represent. We do have, our largest fund is a digital assets hedge fund, which is a broad-based strategy. And so allocating that, we have quite a bit of flexibility. The 2 of the strategies are fairly focused. We have a VC strategy and an NFT strategy. And then our 4th strategy is a digital yield strategy. So again, kind of more narrow in the scope of that one is really looking at just generating yield without taking any market risk or minimizing market risk.
Got it. And I think I was looking at some notes you sent over in advance. Looks like you're looking at a trend toward allocating away from Bitcoin and toward altcoins. Can you talk about a little bit about what you're seeing there and what your own intentions might be for the year ahead?
Sure. I would say obviously Bitcoin is still like the most important asset in this ecosystem to date. I think just based on how long it's been around and how it's managed to kind of sustain itself through that time. There's never been a major outage. There's never been a hack. Last year when we saw China shut down all the major mining firms, or mining pools, a lot of people were concerned that we would see the network go down or some instability. And that ended up ultimately proving incorrect. I mean, the network difficulty did drop temporarily, but the network never faltered in any way. And I think that really is a testament to, Bitcoin's strength just in its network, its security, and its lasting power.
Yeah, 2021 was surely kind of the ultimate word on sort of that Lindy effect, as it's known, right? Where Bitcoin, the longer it exists, the sort of stronger it gets. I think the China example that you cited is the salient one. I've sort of, I think, if you're thinking about what is the most kind of stable or secure cryptocurrency, Bitcoin has to top that list for most people. What are some of the motivations that are causing people to look beyond that and embrace greater risk, I guess you might say?
I think really the biggest reason is that Bitcoin right now doesn't have a major catalyst on the horizon. I mean, you just mentioned it in your previous segment, but the SEC has once again, for example, pushed back a physical Bitcoin ETF, which doesn't look like it will be approved anytime soon. And that is kind of one of the major catalysts that I would say the market is waiting for. I think because there isn't a major, shift in the usage of Bitcoin besides, a store of value, potential payments, it's really hard for people to see the long-term value and at least the risk reward as they kind of learn more about the digital assets ecosystem. There's just so much more if you look further down the stack that it makes sense that people are kind of trending away from Bitcoin.
What about other potential catalysts? I hear talk of course, further adoption by corporate treasuries. I don't think we've really seen a ton of momentum there, but there have been a few headlines. And then, of course, there's always the possibility that additional governments will adopt in the way that El Salvador has. What is it that keeps those from being kind of motivating factors in the way that perhaps some of the catalysts, as you put it, for, say, Ethereum might be?
Well, I think, it's just the difference is there's hard dates and a hard outline and roadmap from the Ethereum Foundation. And there's just not, the governments worldwide aren't putting out a roadmap of, hey, in Q3, we're going to be, adding Bitcoin to our treasury balances. I with Ethereum specifically, they are like working on increasing the network's throughput and lowering transactions. And that is a huge undertaking, the ETH 2.0 transition. The fact that the ETH2 merge is supposed to happen, spring, summer, that is a catalyst that a lot of people can look to and say, okay, if this happens, not only will, money flow back to Ethereum, users will be able to use it, fees will be lower, we can start building enterprise level applications on top of Ethereum. There's so many, I guess, catalysts that kind of come from just that one specific upgrade. Versus if you look at, the catalyst for Bitcoin, it's just like, okay, great. Some people might buy it and hold it for a long time.
I want to come back to that in a moment, but first I want to kind of think about what the world looks like for investors who are new to crypto. I think certainly many people go down a journey that you've described where maybe Bitcoin is the first thing they hear about, the first thing they get interested in, and then they might explore beyond and get interested in other crypto assets, cryptocurrencies, or categories of cryptocurrencies. But what about sort of the new investors that you're seeing coming in, maybe both on the retail and on the larger side of the spectrum? How do you think they're viewing Bitcoin today? Is Bitcoin still the sort of gateway drug or entry point? And how quickly are people willing to move beyond that and kind of embrace a riskier investment?
Sure. At Arca, just to be clear, our focus is on institutional investors, not retail necessarily. So any retail potential investors, this is anecdotal evidence, I would say. On the institutional side, I would say investors are coming to us much more educated than they were a year and a half ago. A lot of the time, they've already bought Bitcoin. They know about DeFi. They are very up to speed on the space, which is great because it means for us there's a little less education to do than starting at zero. For most of them too, they realize Bitcoin is, a great long-term hold, but they don't need to, invest in an active strategy to have a position in Bitcoin. On the retail side, anecdotally, I would say most people are still focused on Bitcoin. However, there's still a lot of misconceptions out there, such as you can only buy one whole Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that would be tough if that were the case for a lot of people, I suppose. So I guess let's talk about that kind of use case, the kind of buy and hold digital gold kind of aspect of Bitcoin. I mean, we're now through 2021, DeFi summer, the sort of seems the NFT craze seems to have peaked a little bit. DeFi summer's in the rearview mirror long since, and DeFi 2.0, I guess, is emerging, but it seems like the use case for Web3 still seems very unclear and poorly defined. I guess I would ask, is there a killer app? And does Bitcoin in some ways benefit from having a relatively clear and simple narrative in digital gold?
I think it does. I think that's why, eventually most investors will hold some Bitcoin passively. I think, however, that there are so many more interesting things happening within digital assets that are even easier for people to understand. I think part of the reason we had the NFT craze this last summer and fall was because people could understand the value or start to understand the value of a collectible or something that was unique and had, a digital provenance or provability. That's very powerful.
Let's talk a little bit about the potential for Bitcoin to be used as collateral, if you would, in the context of decentralized finance. Where do you think Bitcoin is in terms of room to grow and possibly weighted against alternative forms of collateral that might be used there?
I think in general, one issue that DeFi has been trying to tackle is the collateral problem. It's actually an issue that happens across all of digital assets in terms of, there's no true prime brokerage. And so for a fund, for example, like ourselves, it's very difficult to, potentially execute certain investments because you have collateral in several different places and there's cold storage and you have stuff with your custodian. So I think Bitcoin as collateral would help some users within DeFi significantly. There are some projects that have tried to work on it. There is the ability to wrap Bitcoin into an ERC20 token and use it within Ethereum-based DeFi. But I think no one's really figured out how to kind of harness has really been able to figure out how to harness Bitcoin in that way to be effectively usable within DeFi.
Let me just pivot here a little bit and talk about kind of Bitcoin versus alts again. I think historically there's been at least an observed pattern of a kind of a cyclical shift between Bitcoin and altcoins. It's altcoin season, and then you see sort of Bitcoin take over momentum. Has that dynamic changed? Is that sort of, have we seen the last of that? And I guess, if I am kind of allocating away from Bitcoin, how do I cover myself against the risk that dynamic might come back with a vengeance?
Well, I think actually that more and more that will begin to disappear. I think that, one thing that's going to happen for 2022 is that Bitcoin the figure of Bitcoin dominance and the term altcoins are actually going to start to disappear. I think that, Bitcoin will still retain its importance, but I think that investors are going to stop using the term altcoin. We're going to stop seeing these cycles, and we're actually just going to see more sector-based cycles and moves like we're already seeing. Currently, or as you mentioned before, like we had DeFi summer. I think we're going to continue to see cycles that are based on narratives. And the narrative, with DeFi summer was there's users, there's a use case, there's product market fit. With NFTs, it was, we're getting in a lot of non-crypto users into the ecosystem. And I think that you're going to continue to see that cycle with new narratives and new areas. And that will kind of erase the whole Bitcoin altcoin dynamic.
I guess as a final question, if we can look ahead a little bit and think in terms of those narratives, what are the narratives that you are watching most closely at the start of the year?
Well, I think the biggest narrative right now is, or the one that's been emerging and doing so well, is kind of the layer one. I don't want to call it a trade, but essentially the layer one season. Obviously, there's a lot of Ethereum competitors. They're kind of taking their turn in the sun right now while Ethereum is working on their merge. And a lot of them are, having a lot of success with onboarding users, making it easy for them to bridge over assets. So I think that, continuing to watch which of these L1 ecosystems have really sticky users and really, strong growth is going to be important. And along with that, also looking at anyone who's working on cross-chain bridging, just because we are going to have multiple chains in the future.
Just to follow on that briefly, what do you see as the kind of fundamentals to watch when it comes to the traction? If we can say fundamentals in crypto, what would be the fundamentals to watch in those layer ones?
I would say total value locked is a big one. That's basically, dollar assets that have been deposited to the protocol, users or account growth. I hate to use transactions just because depending on the blockchain, those transactions just run even if there's no data in it. And then I would say kind of just the individual projects that have been built on those different layer one blockchains.